It is a quiet morning on Ireland's Atlantic coast. Mullaghmore, County Sligo. Wind over the water, a harbour that smells of salt. A small boat pulls away from the pier, not far out. The engine is steady. The sea is calm enough to trust. On board are several people, a family, different generations. Someone laughs at something small. Someone checks a rope. A man seems calm, almost 80. For him, this is routine. A summer day, like so many. Lobster pots, familiar water. The kind of morning that feels untouchable. Then an explosion tears the silence apart. A single blow of water, wood, and noise, so loud it turns the world inside out. And suddenly, it is no longer about a boat. It is about a name the world recognizes. Lord Louis Mountbatten is dead. Mountbatten was not simply a former admiral. He was a figure who connected several worlds: the military, the monarchy, the empire, politics. His name was internationally known, and within the royal family, he wasn't distant. He mattered. To many, he looked like the last intact piece of an older Britain. Medals, duty, ceremony. For Prince Charles, he was a mentor, a confidant, almost the grandfather he never truly had. Not a figure on a balcony, but a voice in private letters. Advice, pressure, warmth, control. And that is exactly what makes this moment so significant. This is more than an assassination. It is a message. The question is, why did it have to be him, of all people? Why did an old man on a small boat become a target that someone wanted to hit at any cost? Because sometimes, history doesn't aim at a person. It aims at what the person represents. Louis Mountbatten was born in 1900 into a world where a name opens doors, and where closeness to the crown is not only an advantage, but an expectation. He grows up with the quiet certainty that duty is not a choice. It is a role, a script written before you speak your first line. He joins the Navy. He rises, not slowly, visibly. The kind of career that makes people assume destiny is involved. In the Second World War, he takes on high responsibility and becomes one of the most visible officers of his generation. A man photographed, promoted, discussed. After the war, he remains in the public eye, not just as a military figure, but as a national one. The point is not only what he did. The point is what his presence signaled. Continuity. But what truly makes him different is not only rank. It is his place in the network. Proximity to the monarchy, influence inside the armed forces, access in politics and diplomacy. He sits at tables where decisions are made that change countries. And over time, that changes how people see him. Not only as a private person, but as a sign. Mountbatten becomes the kind of man who can walk through doors without knocking. He moves between uniforms and palaces as if they were rooms in the same house. In Britain, that matters, because institutions run on faces people recognize. And Mountbatten's face becomes one of them. He is not elected. He is not ordinary. Yet his influence is real, sometimes visible, often quietly assumed. And here is the first twist. The more public honor you collect, the more you become useful to other people's stories. To admirers, he is duty made human. To opponents, he is the empire still breathing. In 1947, Britain sends him to India. Mountbatten becomes the last viceroy, the man tasked with organizing the end of empire in one of its most important regions. This chapter remains controversial to this day. To some, he managed an unavoidable ending under impossible pressure. To others, he represented an exit carried out in haste, with consequences that tore through millions of lives. And that is the uncomfortable thing about duty. It can look noble at the moment, and tragic in the result. However one judges it, it shaped his image. Because in political conflict, it is often not the person who matters most. It is the meaning attached to the person. And Mountbatten carries meanings like layers. War hero, imperial administrator, royal insider, public mentor. Now add another layer, quieter, but decisive. His closeness to the future king. Because when a man becomes a guide to the heir, he stops being only history. He becomes future. And that makes the final act feel less like random violence and more like a strike aimed at the idea of Britain itself. But that is only the official way to read it. The darker logic begins elsewhere, in a place where symbols are targets. In Northern Ireland, from the late 1960s onward, the conflict later called the Troubles escalates. Years in which fear, mistrust, and violence become part of daily life. In such a climate, a name can become a message, and a death can become a headline the world understands instantly.
From the perspective of Republican militants, Mountbatten stands for British presence and authority, for a history that in Ireland is not only political, but also painfully intimate. The Provisional IRA later claims responsibility for the assassination. From their perspective, it is a strike against a system, and here lies the dark logic. A symbol only works as a message if everyone recognizes it immediately. Mountbatten is that kind of name. But there is something else that makes the difference, something sober. He was reachable.
Summer after summer, he stayed in the same region near Classybon Castle, and he often went out on his boat as if politics were far away. But in a conflict that lasts that long, there is hardly any far away. Routine becomes predictability. Predictability becomes danger. On 27 August 1979, his boat becomes a stage. Accounts of the act describe an explosive device placed beforehand and later detonated from a distance. And it is exactly here that the story tips, because on board there are not only adults, there are young people too. The explosion kills Lord Mountbatten. It also kills his 14-year-old grandson, Nicholas Knatchbull, and the 15-year-old boat boy, Paul Maxwell. Another passenger, the very elderly Dowager Lady Brabourne, later succumbs to her injuries. Several people survive, severely wounded, including Mountbatten's daughter and other relatives. At the moment one wants to strike a symbol, something else comes sharply into view. The price. A boy, a family member, a local boat boy, a grandmother. Because political violence does not strike only targets, it strikes people. And as if this day were a message in two acts, another attack happens on the same day. At Warren Point, British soldiers are ambushed, one of the deadliest moments of the conflict. 27 August 1979 burns itself in as a date, not only because a prominent man dies, but because the conflict shows how far it can reach. In Britain, the shock is enormous. Not only because of the name, but because it destroys the comforting idea that rank and royal proximity offer protection. For the royal family, Mountbatten is a relative. For Prince Charles, he is a loss that lands personally, not ceremonially. For many Britons, he is a face of the wartime and post-war years, a figure associated with duty, discipline, and the old structure of the state. And immediately, the battle over interpretation begins. Was it a strike against a system? Or is it morally indefensible because teenagers died? This tension lasts because it exposes something fundamental. In conflicts, a person is often turned into a symbol. And when a symbol is struck, one almost never strikes only the symbol. If one thinks this episode through quietly to the end, something heavy remains. On that morning, it was not the Empire sitting on a boat. It was a family,